Let's get into this next one here. We got a lot of people commenting, by the way. So thanks to everybody who's tuning in and commenting.
Absolutely.
Brett Moran, always cool having him on. Amy's here. My friend Heather from Las Vegas is watching as well. So that's really cool. So now staying in this topic of the art, you had an interesting question that came through that we put on this list. It's kind of a long one, kind of an in-depth
Yeah.
one. So why don't you filter the question, and then I would love to hear your answer, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So this question came through. Part one of the question was, in Toshindo or any self-defense focused art, you're always reacting to what another person is doing, even if we're in that fire element like we're talking about, based on what we perceive that they're going to do. That's inherently slower than taking initiative to follow an OODA loop model. And for those that don't know, OODA is a word, or is an acronym, OODA. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. You have to observe what's happening, orient yourself relative to the situation, decide on your course of action, and then take action. So if you use that model, that's a sort of a popular model in military terms. The attacker's already into phase 4. They're already in the act part of the OODA loop. Which means the defender, or you as the Toshindo practitioner, because most of what we practice is a response to an attack. How do you overcome the massive advantage that the attacker has? And this is such a great question, right? So you're always going to be behind the curve because you're a good person, right? You're a good person because you've stuck it out. You're in a Toshindo dojo. You're surrounded by other good people. We've had jerks come in. I'm not going to lie. We've had jerks come into the dojo, but they just don't stick it out, right? It's hard to be it's hard to fit a round peg through a square hole, right? So when
Sure.
people come into here, they tend to stick around if they're like-minded people. And our people, Toshindo wide, everybody that I've met, for the most part, is a great person. So we're not the ones that are out there assaulting. We're not the ones out there attacking other people. So we're talking about self-defense and self-preservation. This is where I think the genius of the elemental system comes in, right? The elements allow for a response that you're going to have that you have no control over, and you're not going to have to fight yourself. If you're caught off guard and your natural reaction is to flinch back, that's fine. We're going to show you how to flinch back effectively. If you're tuned in or plugged in or even surprised and that attack happens and you flinch forward, right? Or you just cover your head, that's a fine response. We're going to show you how to follow that up intelligently and tactically, right? Now that's the genius of the system, because if your system is only based on like forward movement, aggression, and you're not feeling that, right? If you're caught off guard or if you're intimidated by the situation and you're not feeling that, not only are you fighting the person or the individual in front of you, you're fighting yourself internally. You're trying to make your body go forward and do something when, your brain is telling you, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. And sometimes get out of there is the absolute right answer, right? So if you're operating from this emotional trigger, I believe Master Russo calls them a flinch response, right? Something happens and you flinch. I don't want to put words into Master Russo's mouth. Let me also say that my answers are from my perspective, and I also reserve the right to be wrong and to change my opinion later, right? I've changed my opinions on stuff multiple times throughout this journey, and I'm sure that I will continue to do so. And I'm not speaking for anybody else, I'm speaking for me. That's been my favorite part. When I saw water was a thing, when I saw that you could tactically move back and counterstrike and flank an adversary, right? If I saw it was okay to shift and move out of the way and let the problem go by, right? And then deal with it. Now I'm not behind the OODA loop anymore. So that's how Toshindo deals with it to me. Now, what I believe that we should also deal with is get a little realism in it, and once in a while get popped, right? Set up scenarios where, not that you're hurt or that you're injured, but like you're caught off guard, you're surprised, maybe stunned a little bit, put some gloves on and see what happens if you get popped in the head. I'm not an advocate for brain trauma, right? Like I don't want anybody to get injured in their training, but I do believe that people need to, you can probably tell by my nose that it's okay if you get hit in the face a few times, right? But it's important because you don't know what's going to happen, and we are not always going to be so plugged in. So I believe a healthy dose of realism. So if you find a good and safe school that will give you that, an opportunity to practice this from a position of disorientation, practice coming out of a position of disadvantage, and again, Toshindo accommodates this breadth. You know, you can decide where it is that, how far down that rabbit hole you want to go. And at different stages in my life, I've been willing and desired to go really far down that rabbit hole. What does it really feel like to be in an actual fight, in an actual confrontation? And I signed up for fights, right? And, but then I got a lot of people in our dojo that never, ever are going to do that. And that's fine. You've got a good, we've got a great curriculum, a great mentor in Anshu Hayes, and that we can provide you lessons, and you can learn these lessons without having to go through that process to a point. I don't know. What do you think about this OODA loop idea and being sort of behind the curve?
So when I saw this question, I thought it was very, very intriguing, which is why I definitely wanted to cover it. And I think as far as timing is concerned, when a moment happens like that, and I tend to look at this not just in a physical sense, like a physical confrontation sense, but any phenomena of stress that you would encounter. I tend to mesh the two, and whereas you kind of mentioned behind the curve or just lagging in the current, I tend to take a step back and I look at it as like, I'm actually part of that. I was part of that before that moment happened. So I'm never, when I look at the OO and the D, right? Observe, orient, and decide. Those things, I don't look at them as mutually exclusive. They are all happening. They're all happening just like that, right? And so the action that is taken is what you have trained for. So to your point, with these different elemental aspects, you could be one. I had a friend that it didn't matter if you could be his mom, okay? If something startled him, his first immediate response was to hit it. Yeah. And I've seen him like almost knock dear friends out, like because you could not take this guy to a haunted house. Yeah. As soon as he experienced stress, the first thing he did was he would hit, and then he would like almost cry, apologizing after he felt so bad. But that was his autonomic response, was to lash out and then figure out what's going on, right? So when I look at this, I'm like, we're already entangled in this before it's even happening. There's something going on. What I think Toshindo does is it heightens your sense of being able to recognize these things before it turns into something that's physical. Now, that's not to say that you're impervious to anything that could potentially happen. The other thing that I think, talking about realistic training, and we talked about this from the Uke's perspective on a previous episode, I think it's highly important that not only do you allow yourself to get hit, you throw on some gloves and you take a couple to the head or to the body, but you get with, like, it was one of the most beneficial things I ever had training with Master Russo, is that I served as his uke as much as I possibly could, because I say it in jest, but I'm like, I've taken such a beating from him, and I'm not talking about bloodied up, right? But hit and twisted and torqued and, just jammed up, so much so that I'm like, you know what? I kind of feel pretty good that if I got into something, that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be all right. Now that's the physical sense of it, right? But even in the elemental process, as we're bringing up new students through the art, the emotional pressure that the students put on themselves and that we put on them as well, sometimes some people that are training will never experience a physical confrontation in their lives, ever. But some people, when they yell that, just someone raising their voice at them will automatically go into a hole and they will lock themselves down. And that's part of this OODA as well, right? That action is what's being done to you, whether it's physically or it's emotionally, right? It could be financial. It could be social. It could be everything. Look at the time that we're living in right now, and so many things that we have to deal with. The last thing we're thinking about is somebody going to lay their hands on me, right? Because we're all social distancing,
Don't touch
right?
me.
They would have to take a lot at this point for somebody to get in someone else's face. Although you do hear about it, and horrible things happen, but that's, I think, the beauty of Toshindo is that it is automatically, subconsciously preparing you for this Uda situation to where the response is the training, not even if you get cracked one time, right? And I see Anshu, he'll do this, right? He'll let himself get hit or partially hit while he's instructing on what the bad guy's role is. Like I've seen him, he'll duck his head and I've seen him take it in the forehead and he still has that warrior spirit is still there. Like you might get a couple off on me, but you won't break me down, right? Physically and emotionally. You may make biting remarks at me and it may cut me to my core, but you will not kill my fighting spirit. It will not happen. That's what I think is pretty incredible about this this very great question that came in, and how do we overcome that advantage that an attacker would have? I don't look at it as I'm starting from 0, they're starting from 100, and I got to get to 100. In my mind, I'm always trained at 85 to 90% awareness.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is just the cultural environment that I live in and what I can expect on a daily basis, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
That's kind of my perspective on that.
You know, full disclosure, I was in the dojo the other day and I was eating lunch. I had my back to the front door and a buddy of mine came in and was real close to behind me before I figured out that he was there. And had he wanted to have attacked me or done something at that point, I would not have seen it come and would not have reacted. And so that situation that caused me to think, you know, I set myself up, you know, where I wasn't like paying attention, I wasn't aware, and, you know, I'm taking these tests where I'm supposed to be able to sense things and stuff like that. And so that sort of honesty with the situation makes me realize like I've still got a lot of training to do and I do need to practice, you know, how do I get out of something if somebody's behind me or if somebody catches me, because I forget my lessons often, which is what's kept me coming back, right? I have made mistakes in training. I've made mistakes in real life, even with things that I know to be correct and I have been taught how to do through Toshindo. And so I appreciate the idea of the question too, because, you know, I've been caught off guard. I've been caught off guard more recently than I would care to admit. And you got to think about, you know, what do you do if you're hit? And that idea of fighting spirit is such an important thing. We practice in the dojo winning, right? We practice winning, and it's not always like winning from, you know, a super slick, just get out of the way, poke them in the eye thing. You know, we try to set up scenarios in our dojo here in Chapel Hill where, you know, the odds are overwhelmingly against you and you still got to win. There's some problem solving stuff, and then there's some solutions that are provided. And that's, again, this breadth of technique. Now, whether or not you can do the thing at the time, we'll go back to that thing that we said, everything worth doing is difficult in the beginning. So be patient with yourself. I have to be patient with myself because, you know, I don't have that all pervasive awareness that I feel like I should have. And I also don't have the desire to sit with my back against the wall all the time and be totally aware of what's going on.
Yeah, you want to engage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we all have seen, you know, people on the internet like that. Like every time I go into a restaurant, I know where 4 exits are, and I figure out like 5 or 6 weapons in the room, and I figured out how to kill everybody with my plastic fork and knife. And I'm not there. I don't want to be there. So I try to live my life in a place and in a way where it's less likely for that to happen. I try to associate with people that I believe are going to not put me in that situation and have my back should something happen. And all of that is related to Toshindo as well. The friends that I have by and large in my life right now are people that I've met through this art. They're like-minded people that when you're on the mat, and especially when we get in, we're really fighting, right? And you let somebody get a choke on you, or you let somebody get real close to hitting you, you've got to trust them. And the thing that you get from, you know, having that quality of relationship carries on, way off of the mat. But again, it was on the mat that I met these people. And that's another thing that I would say to anybody that's looking for a place is check out the culture. Check out the instructors, check out the type of people that are in the class. Because, Anchi was talking about training in the beginning with people that, were hired hitmen from different countries and low lives from this thing. Everybody was looking for these advantages that they could get and take over people. But the culture in Quest isn't like that now. The culture in Quest is wonderful, loving, successful, kind, caring. We were talking about warriors last time, but I'll say they're warriors. They're people that are willing to go forth and help other people. So that was sort of a rant on the quality of the people in the dojo.
No, but it's all relevant to any of these questions. That's the root of why it is that we enjoy this art so much. And it allows an environment to where you can explore all of these potentials. You can allow yourself to go through stress. You can allow yourself to go through hardship. You can allow yourself to have a fantastic fun time. And everybody knows that we're learning a martial discipline, and we can get super serious, and then we can have a super great time all in one class, Yep. And you mentioned something earlier that I just want to cap this on, as far as a person's, not only your journey to black belt, but this, how do you overcome the massive advantage and when you have to act. As a color belt, when you're going through this process, you're getting a lot of things spoon fed to you, right? You're copying and you're mimicking things that the teacher is doing. What I think is the most imperative thing to understand is that what you're being taught isn't, if this happens, then this is what you do. It is not that way. What you are learning is, this is a possible response to this particular stressful situation. It's not something that you want to put in your data bank, to where if your throat is grabbed, or if your arm's grabbed, or if somebody grabs you by the back of the head, if they do that, then I do this. That, I think, is the beauty and the freedom within our training, is that there's so many responses. Your body will tell you what is the most appropriate one. And that's something that you can't start from 0 and go to 100. You live in that fluctuating moment all the time. You will respond effectively to whatever is going on. That's the idea anyway. But that's what we train for. We cultivate, we gather as many experiences as we possibly can in the Q ranks. And then in the Dan ranks, we start saying, okay, now we're going to take this group and we're going to really jump into it more. And, without getting too far deep into the Dan levels, I think that's one of the amazing, beautiful things of our on someone's journey to black belt.
Yeah.
So
you're talking about the Dan levels and having fun in class. Nikki brought up an exercise that we do. So if you guys run a dojo, feel free to use this, but film it so we can all benefit from it. But we do a randori drill where we'll get in the middle of the mat and we'll spin around with our head up as fast as we can for 5 to 10 seconds, so that when you stop, everybody's like falling over dizzy, and then the attacks start. So it sort of simulates that loopiness. Like, what if you got hit? What if somebody snuck you when you weren't paying attention? And can you recover from that situation? It makes for really sloppy randori, but it makes for great Instagram content.
All right.
Yeah.
Note taken.
Note taken.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, there was a second part to this, which I think, we're already 40 minutes into the show. And if you're okay with it, I'm okay with going a little over, because I think we're talking about some pretty important topics.
Sure.
But the second part to this question was, isn't there a danger that students will ignore that model? We're talking about the OODA loop model, and the reality of a fight, and just make it look good in the dojo by not training realistically, so the person who's supposed to win wins no matter what. I think there's a couple different aspects to that, and I don't want to belabor it, but I think if you have a dialed in teacher, they're not going to allow that to happen. And you're going to get the most out of that experience based on your level of training, that your teacher is going to take you to that point or the class to that point where it's like, okay, we're at a pretty stressful moment. Everybody's responding with what they're supposed to now. The rest of it is going to be your own individual interpretation on how you internalize that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the breadth of the accommodation part is key there. If somebody really needs like real self-defense, test you out sort of stuff, like a lot of sparring and that sort of thing, if you have the right training groups and training partners, you can do that. That's something that we do a good amount of here, but I also don't make it mandatory. We set up training groups in class, and if you want to work on this, you work on this. And if you guys want to do it a little harder and faster and glove up, be my guest, let's do that. And I think that the people who don't do that for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason, they don't want to get in and knock each other out. They're still going to benefit from the training. And I think, you know, again, some people are in because they have a job, or they have a fear, or they have a history that makes them really need self-defense and really need like a belief that they can overcome that. And then some people, it's hard enough to get in and get on the mat and train with their partners, and that's fine.
Sure.
It's fine. Just train the way you want to train. And never, I would say, you know, we started with this idea of, we call it challenge by choice in our women's self-defense classes, because we're trying to introduce people to the art. But I try to keep that in everything now. Like I'm gonna invite people to have whatever level of experience they want to have in the class within the realm of what is safe, right? And if you've got the right training partners, then you can do what you want, right?
Sure.
If I've got, if you and I are on the mat, we can go fast. We can throw down. We can have a good time, right? And if I'm working with somebody, or if you were training with me right now, I might say, hey, let's go a little easy. I'm a little stiff. I've tweaked my back a little bit. So right now, I'm not the sparring guy. I may want to slow it down and really work on precision and intellectual, application of the technique. And I think your training should span that breadth.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It's great answer. So let's go into, some folks had some questions on long distance training. And I think it's a good relevant topic for us to talk about, because we're stuck in a situation right now where we do have to rely on some long distance training, or at least training where we can't, to the degree that we're used to, put hands, on each other and really kind of get in there and mix it up. So the question was, one of them were, what do you think about backyard martial artists and teaching through long distance training? So, and there's another one as far as specific techniques, but let's do this one first. What are your thoughts on long distance training?
When I first started at the dojo, I lived an hour and a half away. So I would come up and take my class, but then I had, several days between when I could come back up. So I would go in my backyard. I hung a heavy bag up under a tree. So it was not a great idea. It would rain on this heavy bag, and all the stuffing in the bottom became rock hard, right? So it was like a bag of cement, but that was my training dummy. And, but I was a long distance student for forever. And everybody that pretty much started prior to the Quest Centers really becoming a thing were long distance students. They would learn through seminars. They would have to travel to see their teachers because there just wasn't a network of schools. There was a series of videos. So if you're a long distance student now, like everybody is, or like a lot of us still are, a lot of us still can't actually meet in our dojo, you're following in the footsteps of greatness. So be proud of what is laid in front of you, and you've got every opportunity to succeed because of the amazing digital content that's out there, all the books and videos and DVDs and stuff on YouTube and things like that produced by Anshu, the Shihan Kai, the stuff on ninja self-defense. I dare say stuff like the show. You've got this idea, you've got all this material that you can see and you can practice. Now, what's really important for everybody, and even if you have a dojo, is you've got to connect to the source. Right? It's very easy to get on your own train and kind of go somewhere, right? You can attach yourself to some idea, some sort of identity, some sort of thing, and you can wind up out in left field a little bit if you don't regularly come back in and reconnect with the source. It doesn't mean what you're working on out here isn't valid, but you don't want to lose the plot by never coming back. So if you run a training group, find a mentor, and the mentor should be Anshu Hayes, or it should be one of his seniors, or somebody to help keep you tightened up if Toshindo is your pursuit. So I think also right now, martial arts in general are having a tough time. This is something that, in a time of physical distance, we need training partners. We need to be up close. We need to touch. We need to choke. We need to hit. We need to do all those things. So if you enjoy martial arts, take it upon yourself now to create a training group, if nothing else, out of your family, right? Share it with your family, share it with your roommate, share it with somebody that is on your quarantine, right? Somebody that's quarantining with you, and build it up, because we're going to need those people once these dojos can fully reopen, and we need to keep this thing going, because it's way too important to let this pandemic hiccup cause a major disruption in this. What do you think about backyard ninjas?
Yeah. So I think, like you and like most of us who began, training when we were kids, in, the mid 80s, the closest person I had was Master Russo, and he was an hour and a half to 2 hours away, depending on where I was living in Orlando. So, I would see him maybe once every 3 or 4 months. I would take all the information. I was a detailed note taker. I was a stick figure kid. And I would write all this stuff out, and I'd write what the feelings were, and I'd go back and just by myself for hours, I would just imagine bad guys in front of me and how I was fending them off using these principles and techniques that I learned from Master Russo and the guys that he had training under him. And I, did that for quite a while. And, to your point, and Master Russo would say this as well, like he would see Anshu maybe once every 6 to 7 months, and he would have to travel to a different country at times to be able to see him. And, collect some experiences and then go back and work on them. And then the next time you'd see him, you'd have to either try to remember to ask about what you were doing to make sure that you were doing it correctly, as it were, and then get more stuff to fill up your notepad and then go home and train on that. So, eventually, you get to where you train kind of consistently. But to the folks that don't have a teacher that they can get to even within a 4-hour distance from themselves, I think you've got an awesome tool in ninjaselfdefense.com to where you can see multiple viewpoints of some amazing material. Some of them have been generated through their experiences as far as the seniors are concerned, and some of them look back at the historical material on where all of these things came from. And you can work at your level with what you're being given, and then, via the internet or via, a quick video that you can take on your phone, send that information in so you can get some feedback on it. I do agree to your point that at some time, you're going to have to get physically with someone so they can feel what it is that you're doing. As far as a teacher is concerned, who's checking out your stuff. I know we got some great tools on how you can film what you're doing and send it in, and you can get evaluated and kind of tested for rank that way, which I think is important. I think it's great because it perpetuates your growth and you can see that you're moving along through the system. But there is nothing better than, and I think it's why it's so great why we have these until this pandemic started, why we had kind of these quarterly opportunities around the states where either an Anshu or one of the Shion Kai members would be conducting a seminar to where that you can say, hey, I'm this guy or girl, and I'm a long distance student, and I would just love it if you could spend a couple minutes with me on what I'm working on. I think people have walked away with those opportunities and that feedback to where it perpetuates wanting to go more into that. So I don't see anything wrong with it whatsoever, as long as what it is that you're going after and what you think you're getting out of it is always being checked. You're always dialing back into, am I doing this for the reasons that I started? And if my reasons are changing, are they changing for my growth? Then I think that, the long distance aspect, as challenging as it can be, will certainly pay off. And again, to your point, things like what we're doing here, we're having open conversations on our perspective. I can remember, hearing things in training that were more valuable, being in person with a group of people training, that I heard things that meant more to me about what I was physically doing at the time, or someone's, intellectual perspective on, I've heard some gems that Mark Russo and Anshu Hayes and, just training peers have said about what they're experiencing, where I'm like, I didn't even look at it that way. I didn't even think to look at it that way. Like, this is amazing. Now I can take what I feel I've already got a good handle on physically, and now I can apply that perspective to what's going on. And I feel it it just jump starts your training to a totally different level. So I'm a fan for it. And, you know, to your point, you know, get somebody that you can train with, even if they're not interested in the martial art. You know,
Drag 'em
hey,
out.
you know what? I used to, my friends would always, they would tease me when I was growing up. Like my friends when I was a teenager, it'd be like, oh, here comes Scott. Somebody get ready to throw a punch at him. You know, just do this, just throw a punch at me. You know, what if I throw a punch? What if I do this? You know, and they would tease me about it, but it was like they were cool with me because they were like, they knew how much I loved it and they wanted to see, you know, because they were always enamored. Like, how did you do that to my wrist? And it's like, I didn't feel like you were doing anything at all. And then I would show them and naturally they'd forget it, but they're like, Scott loves it. So let's just do it.